Well, thank you, Nancy. I'm not sure that the Pentagon is terribly surprised by this. The Secretary of Defense Mattis had some strong words for China's activities in the Pacific Rim when he spoke at the Shangri-La Conference in June in Singapore. And I think that, frankly, China has been expanding slowly but surely its global reach, its blue water Navy capability. So that's not a surprise. I think the Russians, on the other hand, actually have been investing in some fairly sophisticated and troublesome systems. They're looking at the sort of growing access to the Arctic and developing submarines. And I think the Pentagon is watching Russia very closely because that's an experienced military that understands expeditionary operations, whereas China is a little bit new to that, and the culture of China has not demonstrated itself to be overtly aggressive against, in a military way, against important powers like the United States. So I think the Pentagon is watching very closely, but they're looking at it as a long, incremental process that's somewhat inevitable given the size and the growth of China's economy and population. This is something that has been expected, and it's part of a long-term trend.
And Ambassador, many have pointed out that it's an interesting one because Russia, when they previously held these war games, if we can call them that, somewhat was in looking to China perhaps as a foe, not an ally, and it hasn't always been easy with these two countries. So this does raise the question of whether or not one of the unintended consequences of U.S. President Trump's trade fight is that he's bringing together what previously have been strange bedfellows, you might say.
Well, yes, and I was interested in your correspondence and analysis of the sort of novel trade and economic arrangements that are being discussed in Vladivostok. But another way to look at this, and I think many in Washington see it this way, is that Xi Jinping is somewhat, looking, as you say, for to show the world that he still has influence and can turn to Vladimir Putin and conduct high-level summitry. The Americans just had a very high-level, unprecedented 2+2 ministerial in New Delhi. So U.S.-India relations with respect to what they call the Indo-Pacific region have just been elevated to a new level. And, the President Trump has a trade confrontation with China that could become more volatile. North Korea seems to be sending, we don't understand North Korea very well, but Chairman Kim Jong-un is sending a signal to Washington that is positive, and President Trump is reciprocating, even though the U.S. and China have this difficult trade dispute going on. So I think in some ways, China is trying to prove that that they aren't losing face. And as for Russia, their economy is probably less than 1/15 the size of the U.S. economy. It's not a very healthy economy. And I think many strategic analysts have looked at the Russian Far East, which is not very heavily populated, several time zones of territory, and have always believed that China ultimately would exert tremendous economic influence over those natural resources in that territory, just due to the proximity. So in some ways, is Russia the winner if there's a deepening of Russian-Chinese investment in the Russian Far East, or is Russia the loser? So I think that that's a question for Russia to ponder. I just don't see it as strategically alarming. In many ways, I think it reflects a more assertive set of policies coming from Washington, where Russia is being challenged. The pipeline to Germany, the bombing in Syria, the new Indo-Pacific policy, and the strong words about an American assertion. There's legislation in Congress that would try to match the Belt and Road Initiative that China is funding with American development assistance tools that bring in private equity, and the sponsors in Congress talk about this being dollar for dollar. So there's kind of a push from Washington to assert American influence again in the Pacific, and the other two countries, I think, are responding to it.
Hey everybody, it's Hadley Gamble from our new CNBC Middle East Bureau in Abu Dhabi. Thanks for stopping by. Now to watch more, you can try one of the videos that just popped up on your screen. And don't forget to subscribe.